I know you know this because many of you were talking about this as you entered today, but it's marathon weekend in Pittsburgh, isn't it? Some of us have people running. I found out Phil ran the half marathon this morning. John and Ella Schneider ran 5K yesterday, and then John's running the full marathon today. Kathleen, as many of you know, the executive director down at Roots of Faith, is running for Roots of Faith and has been on an incredible health journey herself. She was running the half marathon, and it sounded like she was just about done a little while ago. So we'll be 3 miles to go. She's almost there. We'll be praying for her throughout this message, I think. They are all incredible. I'm not a runner. I have no real basis for what this is like. But I started talking to some of my friends about this and wondering, friends who do this kind of work and have run marathons before. And one of the things I wanted to know was, do you study the course map and learn every single turn and memorize the roads you have to go on? Or do you just kind of follow the crowds and I'll figure it out because there'll be signs and there'll be people to follow and not really get that worried about it? And my friend Greg responded, I sent him a text about this. He said, yes, yes, and yes. It's a little bit of all of those things. You take a look at the map, you try to get a sense for where you're going. But if you have not literally been in that location before, that's only going to do so much good. You're not going to know the landmarks. You're not going to know the roads. So you also have to look for signs on the way. You also have to follow the people and hope that there's good volunteers pointing you so you don't miss a turn. It takes a little bit of everything. You know, running a marathon, as you well realize, takes a lot more than just knowing the destination. There's training, there's effort that goes into that ahead of time. And because of that, and because of thinking about the destination, I thought it made a lot of sense to talk about those things this week as we think about Jesus saying, you know the way. There's a lot that goes into that. And a marathon reminds us of the way that that's true. Jesus is trying to say it's about more than memorizing a destination. It's about more than looking at a map and memorizing the path that you have to follow. Faith is a journey and a way of life, and there are people around you that help show you. There's a map that helps show you. All of those things become tools on your journey. We're still celebrating Easter. We're in that season afterwards. And the Bible lesson is another story about new life. Although again, like last week, this is not actually a resurrection story, right? This is happening before Jesus has died. And he's talking to the disciples, and he's telling them, actually, in what's essentially a big, huge goodbye speech in the Gospel of John, about everything that is to come. And most of us hear this and think about funeral services. I realize that, right? I see the acknowledgement on some of your face. Maybe it's been at a family member's. Maybe you've attended one. I've certainly preached this text in the context of funerals before. And I understand that because Jesus is talking about eternal life. He's talking about heaven. He's talking about dwelling with God. So that makes sense. But it's also a passage for right now. And I invite you to try and hear it through that lens today. Try to think less today about heaven and the place that we're going to be with God, and try and think about what he might have been telling the disciples and what he might be telling us right now in this moment. This is an invitation to follow and to live in the way every single day, every single moment, not just a destination in the future. He opens, Jesus does, by saying, don't let your hearts be troubled. In reality, they had every reason to be troubled and anxious and afraid. What happens right before this in chapter 13 is you have essentially what we've come to know as the Last Supper stuff. Jesus is washing their feet. He's predicting Judas's betrayal. He's predicting Peter's denial of him. And then he turns around, and the very next thing we have recorded in John is, do not let your hearts be troubled. It seems like they had an awful lot to be troubled about. Things were not going how they imagined. And that was probably all-consuming in a lot of ways. It would have been hard to think about anything else. And so Jesus is talking to them and trying to remind him who he is, that he'll always be with them, that God will always be with them, and in the end, everything is going to be well. I think that's why we talk about this in context of funerals and heaven, right? Because we're looking to the end and we're seeing that everything does turn out okay, but it's also so much more. When Jesus is telling them, you know the way, they get confused, don't they? We have Thomas. He is our good friend from a few weeks ago who we said gets labeled a doubter. Today he's full of questions, and he says rather logically, we don't know where you are going. How could we know how to get there? You haven't told us where that is yet. And I think that makes sense. Philip kind of picks up on that, and he says, show us. Show us what you're talking about. That is logical. We can relate to that. Most of us like to know where we're going, right? Give me a destination, and I can figure it out. I can map a path to get there. But without that final place, it's a little bit harder. Thomas is asking the questions that we all have. Where are we going? You know, today, we would get out our phones or we would get in the car and we would plug that into a GPS, right? That's what many of us would do. A while ago, I can remember my grandma and my mom trying to teach me to read maps, right? We would get these out. Now, I've discovered I have not short of 10 of these in my car presently. Why? We don't use this anymore, but if you need a map, apparently I can get you one. But then you challenge to fold it all back up, right? And you put it away. I don't even know if we teach map reading anymore. But we like to know the path and where we're headed, no matter what it is we're using. If it's a big paper fold-out map, if it's a GPS, it doesn't matter. I think the assumption is if we know where we're going, we can figure out how to get there, right? We can chart a course. I can remember my grandmother one time when I visited her in Chicago, she was highlighting the map and how you get down to wherever we were headed. But it's not always true, is it? Just because you know the destination doesn't actually mean you can get there. I was talking to Lyndall just this last week about the storms that we had about a year ago and how many trees they brought down. He and I both had a similar experience that night. We were out and tried to get home, and it took forever because you knew where you were going, but you could not get there by the path that you thought you could. You kept having to course correct and turn around and try a different way. Some of you just had that problem a few weeks ago trying to get to church. Same thing. You knew where you were going, but it didn't mean the path was clear. The journey of faith can be like that. Look, I think most of us kind of know what we're trying to do. We kind of know where we're going, but that doesn't mean that the path is obvious and clear all the time. Jesus wants us to think about it not like a where, but a how. How do you get there? How do you live your life? That's what faith is about. He wants us to know you can see faith. And if you can see faith, you can follow it. The markers are there, and just like in a marathon, they inform you whether or not you're on the right path. So when Jesus says, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life, it's a reminder that you already have everything you need to follow. You've seen who God is. You know what it means. The way Jesus lived, the way Jesus died and rose, that has taught us something. The way Jesus marks a path of love, the way Jesus provides comfort and welcome and healing and hope and community and belonging, all of those things teach us about what it looks like to follow. And when we follow, Jesus reminds us that we can be assured that God is with us. That's what it means to dwell with God, both now and in the future. This story, it's for today too, because you do know the way, you've seen it. It is not as mysterious as we think it is. You know how to get there. But it's easy to become preoccupied with the destination and lose sight of right now, isn't it? We do. We like to know where we're headed. I like to know where I'm headed. In recent years, there's become a term for this, our preoccupation, destination addiction. Have you heard this one? The idea was coined by British psychologist Robert Holden, and he writes this: destination addiction is a preoccupation with the idea that happiness is somewhere else. He says we are suffering literally from the pursuit of happiness. We're always on the run, on the move, on the go. Our goal becomes not to enjoy the day, but to get through it. And so we have to get somewhere else before we can relax and savor the moment. He warns people about this. He says, beware, until you give up the idea that happiness is somewhere else, it will never be where you are. And I wonder if Jesus is echoing that caution today. Stop focusing on where and start focusing on right now. How are you living right now? How are you being present right now in the world? God is with you on the journey. You will get there in the end. But the answer you need is not like a 7-step lifestyle fix that you can follow a path for. The answer is how you're living life every single day and every single moment, and how you're seeing people and being in community together. A faithful life where you dwell with God is about what you're doing. You just trust that God is there and God is with you, and you know more than you think. That's essentially what the disciples are being asked to and encouraged to live. God has already shown you the way. You know, we act like Jesus' resurrection is the end of a climactic, awesome story, and the miracle is there, and everything is done, and that's it. But it's actually not the end. It's never the end. This story that we read in John 14, even before it happens, Jesus is already talking about the ways that he's going to ascend and that he won't be there literally with the disciples all the time. Their life will continue. Our lives have continued since Easter happened. But the message remains the same. God is here. God is with you. And you know the way because you've seen it. You can follow even if the path isn't clear, even if you don't know the final destination, because you know how to welcome. You know how to love. You know how to extend grace. You know how to be kind. You know how to comfort and provide and do all the things that you've seen in Jesus and you've seen in this community of faith. Follow, trust, and believe. That's what Jesus wants us to do. Faith is never, ever about a success or a specific destination or a way that your life has to look. It's about the journey. And we take that together in community, trusting that God is here. You know, we may not be literally out running a marathon today, although we have some friends who are. But the metaphor continues to work. Faith takes training and observation, and it takes a community, just like a marathon does. We are walking that path together. We are helping each other see that path. You know, there is a moment that has gone viral from a Boston marathon, which happened maybe a week and a half ago. Near the end of the race, about 1,000 yards from the finish line, there was a Massachusetts man who started having trouble, fell over, and wasn't going to be able to finish. And 2 others, one from Brazil and one from Britain, got on his sides and helped him the last 1,000 yards. Now I'm told that they sacrificed personal best times to help him get across the finish line. You see, that is the way. Sacrificial love is what Jesus taught us. That's who God is. You see everyone, and it's not just about you. It's not just about that final destination that you're trying to get to, but you come alongside and you help the community. You get there together. I told you earlier, this is part of a lengthy goodbye speech that Jesus offers the disciples. It's a word of comfort for a group of people who weren't really sure what the future was going to hold. It's a word of comfort for people who are troubled by everything going on around them. And maybe that's you today. It's all of us some days, isn't it? So hear Jesus' good news. God is here. God is with you. The path is right in front of you, and you do know the way. You've seen it. You can live it. One of the ways that we see that is in the communion meal that we're going to partake in just a few minutes together. But you see it in each other. You see it in the Bible stories. So remember this week the ways that you see that, and trust that God is there even as you follow, even as we don't always know what the final destination will be. You know the way, says Jesus. I am the way. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen.